It doesn't matter if you're 6-0 or 0-6. You need to watch this whole video because if you grind the waivers, that is exactly how you win your fantasy league. Again, all the players are in order that I would prioritize getting them, so let's go ahead and hop into it. Jumping right into the running back category, we have Kamani Vidal. He is only rostered in 31% of leagues. He showed that he's the real deal for the Chargers. Started the game, reports got everybody kind of crazy. Was Hassan Haskins going to start, which threw everyone off, myself included. But if you've listened to me for a while, or even just go back and listen to the last week's waiver wire, you could see that I was extremely high on Kamani Vidal because of his burst, his receiving profile, and then we saw it all on display just in week 6. Now, the reason Vidal is highest on the list is not only because he's going to get at least another 3 weeks without Amari and Hampton, but it looks like it's going to be even longer than 3 weeks based off all the reports that we're seeing so far. Coming in at number 2, Michael Carter. He's only rostered in about half of leagues. He got the split with Bam Knight, which was another weird backfield situation where it just threw everybody for a loop. Bam Knight did get more carries. He got 2 more than Carter. Now, Carter is the lead passing back, and he got 5 targets in both of these last 2 games. And now Amari DiMercado is battling an ankle injury. They play the Packers, the Cowboys, and the Seahawks in their next 3 games. All 3 of these teams are top 8 in points per game, and the Cardinals are not favored in any of those. That's why I like Michael Carter over Bam Knight. But Bam Knight is not a bad pickup either. Now, Woody Marks. He's also available in about half of leagues. Went into the bye week after a disappointing game versus the Ravens. But again, I mentioned him on last week's waiver wire episode because I wanted everybody to pick him up before this week. In the last game they played versus the Ravens, the process was right. The Ravens were really bad, and they were much worse than we expected. We saw Nick Chubb and Dameon Pierce get all of the carries in the fourth quarter. There was no Woody Marks. No fourth quarter opportunities. All that says to me is they didn't want him to get injured, they didn't want any more film on him, or they wanted to rest him because he's the starter. There are beat reporters coming out of Houston saying that he is more of the passing down back, and that makes a lot of sense. He's the best pass catching back on that roster. And in week 7, they do play the Seattle Seahawks, who are 5th in points per game and favored on Monday Night Football. And last of the running backs, I have Kenneth Gainwell, available in about 60% of leagues. He's mainly a pickup in PPR leagues. He's had 6 targets and 6 receptions in each of the last 2 contests. And now they're not mentioned here, but it is worth noting we should be picking up high-end handcuffs like Brian Robinson Jr., Tyler Algier, and Ray Davis. They're in good offenses, and we know what their role is. On to wide receivers, I have Kendrick Bourne. He's rostered in only 35% of leagues. If you have back-to-back 100-yard games, you should not be on the waiver wire. Juwan Jennings is wildly injured. He's playing with like broken ribs and other things that are going on with his body, and we're not sure that Ricky Pearsall is going to suit up in week 7. We need to wait on that, but as of right now, Kendrick Bourne should be on everybody's roster. And you'll see the next 2 names may be new to a lot of people. They're rostered in 0% of leagues. I've got Tez Johnson and Cameron Johnson. You could also throw in Sterling Shepard if you would like. But you're going to have to shoot your shot at one of them, whether it's going to be Tez Johnson, Cameron Johnson, Sterling Shepard. It's a lot like the Bills, Packers, and Patriots. We don't really know who it's going to be on each and every single given week, but we know it's going to be somebody. I'm fine if you want to take your gamble on one of the younger guys, one of the Johnson guys, or if you just want to go with the tried and true, Sterling Shepard is a decent pickup too. All this to be said, Mike Evans is the biggest winner of everybody. We don't know the severity of Ibuka's injury, so we do need to figure out just a little bit more information before we go all in on any of these guys. Josh Downs' usage has picked up over these last 2 weeks, but it's really Tyler Warren, Michael Pittman, and Josh Downs. No other pass catchers there. If somebody goes down, it's going to boost up Josh Downs' stock, but right now, probably really only usable in shootouts. Luther Burden III, rostered in only 11% of leagues. Coming out of the bye, he had more receptions and yards than Rome Odunze and DJ Moore. And it's worth noting that DJ Moore went to the hospital shortly after the game. Despite them calling it precautionary, it is something to monitor, but that could be big things for Luther Burden. Jalen Colker, only rostered in 12% of leagues. This guy is more of a stash right now, but Carolina does need a wide receiver 2 very badly. He had some steam going into the season because he had some flashes at the end of 2024. Now, a couple of other names that I want to list off here. This is for the people who are listening. Kayshon Boutte, he's only 9% rostered. Kind of like the Packers receiving options, as I mentioned with the Patriots earlier. They don't have a clear one, and May is just throwing it to whoever's open. So if that's Boutte on a given week, it's Boutte. Josh Reynolds of the Jets, he's not rostered basically anywhere. Garrett Wilson is expected to miss some time. With their bye week in week 9, we might have Josh Reynolds as the main pass catcher, probably behind Mason Taylor in weeks 7 and 8. Jordan Whittington or Tutu Atwell, either Rams wide receiver that you want to pick up, because Puka Nacua is probably going to miss here this week. It's a 1 week spot start. Whittington would be my pick because he plays more of the Puka Nacua role, but if you wanted to go Tutu Atwell, that's perfectly fine as well. And I talked about Mason Taylor just last week, but I'm also talking about him here again. As I mentioned with Josh Reynolds, 37% rostered as Mason Taylor. He needs to be 100% rostered over these next 2 weeks. Wilson, like I said, going to be sidelined for at least 2 weeks, then they go into the bye. During those 2 weeks, the Jets get to play the Panthers and the Bengals. They're 31st and 32nd against tight ends. He should be a slam dunk. Harold Fannin Jr., he's only rostered in about a quarter of leagues. Now, he led the team in receptions, and he was second in targets behind Jerry Jeudy. David Njoku is banged up with a knee injury, and we don't know the extent of it just yet. If we get clearer news that he's out for much longer, then it should shoot Fannin up as one of the highest pickups this week. Cade Otton, only rostered in 12% of leagues. I talked about Tez Johnson, Cameron Johnson, Sterling Shepard. I would much rather, if you need a wide receiver, go with one of those guys. But I would much rather have Cade Otton as a second receiving option. The Bucs have already confirmed that Chris Godwin and Bucky Irving will not play in Week 7. We're waiting on an MRI right now for Emeka Egbuka, and the team is hopeful that Mike Evans will practice here this week. All roads lead to Cade Otton, and I love the matchup versus the Lions and a 52.5 point over-under. Michael Mayer. Now, I got a question in one of my live streams discussing tight ends. They said Jake Tonjes or Michael Mayer, and I said Tonjes because we have no Kittle, we have no Pearsall, we have a banged-up Juwan Jennings. Plus, we had seen weeks before that Tonjes was the tight end 9 and the tight end 6. The situation really hadn't changed. We still had Mac Jones at quarterback, and it was against the Bucs, who have been in shootouts in what seems like every single week. Now, the person who asked the question, it's a valid question, and I get it, but they came back into the comments after the week, after the games have played, after Michael Mayer had a career fantasy day, and said that Michael Mayer needs to be a top 15 when Brock Bowers is out. While Mayer may be in streaming consideration, we should be playing the matchups. So I'll be avoiding it, but again, feel free to go with your gut. Also, not saying this was an example of that, but don't be the guy coming back in the comments after the games have played and said, "You told me to start Quinshon Judkins over Kamani Vidal. You lost me my week. You're an idiot." 1, you look like a loser. 2, it's your roster. I'm here to give you advice and explain the details on why I would pick one player over another. If you've got some intuition or gut feeling about a particular start sit, go with your gut. Nothing feels worse than picking the wrong start sit when your gut was telling you to pick the right player. We've both said, I should have listened to my gut way more often than we've said, I never should have listened to my gut. Jackson Dart. He joins elite company. He's one of 3 quarterbacks to rush for 50 or more yards in each of their first 3 starts. The other 2 are Lamar Jackson and Jalen Hurts. Now, this week, he gets a horrible matchup. It's second worst for quarterbacks, but I'd love to stash him for future games. Sam Darnold. We need to put a little bit of respect on his name. Outside of week 1, he's been pretty good for the season. He's quarterback 11 right now, including that bad week 1. The Texans, unfortunately, that's who he plays this week, are first against quarterbacks, and then he goes into the bye in week 8. So I understand if you want to fully fade Sam Darnold, but he should be on your monitor, and again, pay him a little bit of respects. Aaron Rodgers, probably the only real streaming option of the other quarterbacks. The Bengals have been beat up by quarterbacks when they haven't been torched by running backs on the ground. Streaming defenses for Week 7. Again, we're looking at lower roster defenses, less than 50%. There are some, obviously, that I like more than this, but they aren't widely available. You can check the link in my bio for my rankings. Browns versus the Dolphins. This one here, the Dolphins' identity and the one thing that looks good on the Dolphins is Devon Achane. And the Browns are the best against the running back position, who is coming off a 3-interception game, although albeit not all 3 of those were his fault. I like both defenses in this next matchup, Seahawks versus the Texans and Texans versus the Seahawks. We've seen 3 horrible games out of the Texans offense, scoring 9, 19, and 10 points. Then we saw back-to-back decent games, 26 and 44 points. Both of those high-scoring games were against bad defenses. The Seahawks are not one of those, especially when healthy. On the Texans' defensive side of the ball, they're first against quarterbacks and 5th against wide receivers, so it'll be an uphill battle for Sam Darnold and JSN. The Rams will most likely be without Puka Nacua, and the Jags are second in takeaways per game. The Jags also have played internationally in London every single year since 2013, except for the COVID season and just last year. So we might be able to see a little bit of a home field advantage across the pond in one of the biggest stadiums in the world. And again, if you haven't already, make sure you subscribe to the channel. I go live each and every single day. I'm dropping rest of season rankings, weekly ranking videos, and waiver wire videos each and every single week. Good luck out on the waiver wire.